It was a Sunday, early in the morning. I live in the suburbs, but my parents own a farm that I enjoy going to because I get to see my dog. Her name is Molly. She's a mutt, but she's not a tiny dog by any means. At that time, I felt very safe around her and would often take her for walks in a forest that was nearby. The day started off like any other. Me and my dad got in the car, drove around for a while, and arrived at the farm. I immediately got out of the car and hugged Molly. My parents always got angry when I hugged her since I'd smell like her for the rest of the day. I put her leash on and asked my dad if I could take her for a walk. He always thought that we would just go down a road and back, but I always found it more interesting to take her to the forest. I always felt a certain kind of peace and relaxation there that was unmatched by anything else. So we took a turn and headed to the forest. Usually when we got there, I'd take her leash off so that she could explore on her own. Most of the time, I'd carve my name into the trees or look for anything interesting. I was playing baseball with some rocks and a wooden leg, presumably from an old table, and then I heard it. Molly was barking at something. This wasn't usual when we were in the forest. I thought it was a fox or some other animal, so I quickly grabbed the wooden leg like a weapon. I knew that if it was a fox I wouldn't attack it, but I had a sense of security while I was holding it. I called out, "Molly! Molly!" but she just kept barking. This was very strange for me since she always came to me when I called her. I followed the sound of her barks and I stumbled across a scene I will never forget. There was a man, probably in his late 50s, half naked. He was carrying a large machete in one hand and holding moonshine in the other. This was the first time that I stumbled across anyone in the woods, let alone someone half naked and carrying a big-ass machete. He was completely ignoring Molly and hacking away at the ground for some reason. I didn't really know how to handle the situation. Even now, I have no idea how I would handle it. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked in confusion. I don't think I understood the seriousness of the situation at the time. He turned around, revealing his face. He had some of the clearest blue eyes I have ever seen to this day. I could see them so well because they were open wide.
"Come here, boy. Look what I've dug up."
I was afraid that if I didn't listen to him, he would start chasing after me, and that was something I wanted to avoid at all costs. I got closer, but I kept a good distance. I didn't see anything except for an empty hole. He returned to hitting the ground with his machete, occasionally taking sips from the bottle. I used this window of time to get Molly and started walking away slowly so as not to notify him that I was leaving. But then I took one final glance at the man. His head was dug deep in the hole. I was intrigued, so I kept looking. I know, how stupid of me. He finally got up from the ground. I was shocked when I saw him carrying a bone in his mouth. I have no idea what animal it belonged to, if it even did belong to an animal. I had seen enough and I started sprinting with my dog. As we ran, I heard him laughing, and then I saw something flying from the corner of my eye. It was that damn machete. I heard him yell, "Damn it!" This made me run even faster. I know the forest very well, so I wasn't afraid of getting lost. I ripped through branches and bushes until I got out of that forest, but I didn't stop sprinting until I arrived at the garage. I didn't tell my family a single thing about the man, since I was afraid that they'd get angry and wouldn't allow me to walk Molly anymore. Needless to say, I never went to that forest alone ever again. Man with the machete and a bone in his mouth, let's not meet again. This particular event took place when I was about 13 years old, 2 years before I moved from North Wales to South Wales. I'm 24 now, so this was way back in 2007 or 2008. I lived with my mother and my younger brother and sister at the time. We were in a nice little house in front of a patch of woodlands that was publicly accessible. My siblings and I used to go up there and play all the time. It was a small little patch of land with a river running through the middle of it. One day, my brother and I were out in the woods with a few other friends playing a game we called Blocky. It's like hide-and-seek base tag. It was our turn to go and hide, so we went off to find a nice hiding spot. Only, that afternoon we noticed that out in the middle of the woods, a small clearing had been made that wasn't there a couple of days prior. We went over to have a look, and there was a small tent and the remains of a campfire. As soon as we got close, a grizzled old man who we presumed was homeless jumped out and started swinging this rusty metal bar at us. He actually hit my younger brother in the arm and gave him a nasty cut. So I told my brother to run back home and tell our mum. He did that straight away. Then my friends came over to see what all the crying was about, and this man just started screaming at us for ruining his home. He was telling us that we shouldn't be playing in the woods. We were all pretty angry at this guy for hurting my brother, so we were yelling back at him for a while and asking why he did that. He just kept screaming loudly at us, and he was starting to make no sense. Like, he started to blather about how he was going to go around and steal people's pets and eat them, and all kinds of fucked up shit like that. After a short while, we all just legged it out of there because he picked up that metal bar again and started to threaten us with it. When I got back, my mother was on the phone with the police and trying to patch up my brother's arm. When the police arrived, I had to show them where this guy was, but when they got there, he wasn't anywhere to be found. They actually sealed off the woodland area with tape and got some dog units out to track him down. They eventually found the guy hiding in a tree. He got arrested and taken away, and that was pretty much the last I heard of the guy. We weren't allowed to go and play in the woods for a while after that. I spoke with my mother about this recently, and we talked about it a little more in depth. She was told by the police that this guy was wanted for burglary and sexual assault. I only found that out a couple of weeks ago because she really didn't want to tell me when I was younger. Absolutely crazy stuff. Dangerous creep. I love waking up in the dark and walking the sunrise with my dogs. I didn't intend to own 2 huskies and a German Shepherd mix, but they each found me and I couldn't turn them away. We usually jog about 5 miles daily, often just in the neighbourhood. But nearly as often I load us up in the van and drive 10 minutes to the wooded metro park. I love it there. They offer some trails that allow quads and motorbikes, some bicycles and skis, some just people, and last year they opened a new one that allows pets. It's a 5-mile loop into the area farthest from the city. We live on the northern edge of town, but in the dark with no leaves on the trees, you can clearly see the red glow of the CVS sign for most of the hike. These are tamed woods with asphalt paths and concrete fire pits and rangers patrolling regularly. The hospital behind CVS means there's emergency medical care within walking distance. I was coughing again in the night. I had a serious case of pneumonia 2 months ago and was not fully recovered when the sinus infection hit me. I'm past the fever part now, so we're walking, not yet jogging. But after being up in the night, I didn't get up in time to go for the walk before I dropped my kids off at school. Then my youngest had an appointment, and then I had to run a few errands, and then we had unexpected visitors right after school, and then they stayed for dinner. Finally, I got the dogs into the van and we made it to the park just before it started to get dark. I was irritated at all the little things that had kept me from my walk all day. But as we drove all the way to the back of the park, I realized we'd be walking the sunset, watching it over the lake and the hills and through the bare trees. And the park was clearing out now, as it started towards dark. We would very nearly have the place to ourselves and might not have to pull off the path to let others pass us. An amazing number of people who are afraid of dogs hike the pet path. All those little irritations had led up to this singular moment of beauty I would not otherwise have seen and appreciated. This was going to be a really good walk. It's funny how life works out when you let it. I parked in my usual spot at the farthest end of the parking lot by the bathrooms. A mile-long walkers or joggers only path looped through the woods and by the lake and came out by the bathrooms. I liked to run it when I came here alone. It was a glorious walk through a Bob Ross painting. My mind cleared and my thoughts quieted, and I simply experienced the woods, my feet on the path, my dogs panting, the nature sounds, the beauty of the sky. I absolutely loved it. About halfway now, and the city sounds had faded till I could only hear the birds and frogs and insects all singing their songs of territory and mating and life. Utter silence and absolute stillness. My dogs and I turned instantly towards the source of the sound and froze. Behind us and to the right, the sound had come from the crest of a hill. I could see nothing and heard only the dogs panting. I waited for the nature sounds to return. They didn't. All three of the dogs slowly raised their ruffs, fur standing on end all around their shoulders and necks, tails held tall and proud, making themselves look larger and more threatening. I took a step towards them, and the female husky, the leader of my little pack, instantly put her ears back and her head down and pulled me down the path. All three of them left their tails and ruffs up, but the two males also put ears back and heads down and began to pull me, so off we went. The woods were still silent. We must have startled a buck on the slope of the hill, not seen him, and after we passed he leapt up the hill and jumped a dead tree. His hoof must have hit a dead branch, and the branch broke and scared everyone. Why were the woods still silent? Maybe there's someone up here. Homeless people must stay here sometimes. The bathrooms have heat so the pipes don't freeze. This is about as far out as the path goes. It would be a good place to sleep. Maybe he's setting up a shelter and that noise was the breaking of a branch. Why were the woods still silent? We were about as far from the city as we could get in these woods, and you couldn't see the CVS sign or the glow from streetlights. You couldn't even hear the traffic noises. It was dark and still and absolutely quiet except for the panting dogs and 4 sets of footsteps on the path. I wanted to run. The dogs wanted to run. Bigfoot? That was a Bigfoot breaking a log to say get out? There are no Bigfoot in city limits, I promise you that, brain. It was a deer. The woods are still quiet because of us. I have 200 pounds of dog here, yes, they're the big kind of husky, and another 200 pounds of me. We are the scariest things in the woods. There's no bear. There's no wolves. There's no Bigfoot. There are deer and there are foxes and there might be an angry raccoon, but we are the biggest, baddest, scariest things in these woods. Unless there's someone with a gun. The dogs had not stopped once to sniff or mark. Heads down, ears back, tails and ruffs still held high, they just wanted to go. We'd gone almost a mile now, me craning my head the whole time, trying to see as far as I could in all directions while letting the dogs pull me down the path. It was still absolutely silent. Not an overflying goose. Not a cricket. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Except us. Here came the third and longest of the 3 steep hills on this trail. I had been running these to rebuild my strength and endurance, but if I ran this, I'd be blown at the top. The top where it curved around as it crested and you couldn't see anything past the thick trees. The top where if you were deeper in the woods, you could follow a more gradual ridge up to the crest of the hill and wait, unseen, for someone to come up the path. Ambush. It was a deer. Turn around. It was just a deer. What if it's behind us? Ambush. Deer. Gun. This is why I run. The noise in my head is unbearable otherwise. Up the hill. Walk. Pay attention. Watch the dogs. The dogs were still on alert, but didn't hesitate to go up the hill. In fact, they wanted to go faster. Just walk. Don't get smoked. Be able to run or fight if you have to. Yeah, okay, I'm scared. The woods should not still be silent. The dogs should not still be on alert. It's not a cat or a bear or a wolf, but it could be a person. So let's be smart. Just walk. We are not good prey. The dogs will protect me. The huskies might not alone, but the shepherd will, and they'll follow his lead. Be smart and get out. Only another mile now to the lake and the first parking lot. Then another half-mile along the lake to the second lot where my van was. Hearing traffic noises now, but still no birds. No crickets. No frogs. The smell almost stopped me in my tracks, but the dogs kept pulling. Sour and grassy and oddly metallic and shit. Shit and blood and partially digested grass. I smelled the contents of a deer's stomach. Someone hunted these woods, and the dogs were not at all interested in the smell. We ran. I don't remember much of that last mile. We just ran. Desna, the big female husky, finally stopped to drink some lake water as we came out by the parking lot. Then she began to sniff and pee. The boys followed her lead. There was a single truck parked. I relaxed quite a bit, but I still felt on edge. Down the lake, in the next parking lot, I could see headlights. They must be parked at the turnaround at the end of the lot closest to the lake. Their headlights illuminated the lakeside path. They're watching us. Halfway to the van now, and the car drove away. 20 feet from the van, I heard a motor coming down the nearest path. I decided to put the dogs in the car on the driver's side instead of the passenger side like normal. The sound of the motor came closer. The leashes caught on the armrest and I had to untangle them before the dogs could jump into the van. The motor came closer down the path. I had to be gone before it came out. I knew it with an absolute certainty. Finally, the dogs were in. I slammed the door and jumped in the front, fumbling for the lock button, shaking hands unclipping the keys from my jogging belt, starting the car and gunning it into reverse. And as my headlights swept over the entrance of the path by the bathrooms, they lit up a four-wheeler coming out of the woods. I was dropping the transmission into drive and hitting the gas. As my brain processed what my eyes saw, it informed me that there was something across the handlebars. A gun? A deer carcass? I couldn't tell. Because of the angle when pulling away, I couldn't see him in the rearview mirror at all.